Hi, I'm Brian. Welcome to Autogefühl. Well, the GLC refresh is in, and it seems entirely fitting that what we're looking at right here in Geneva is the hybrid model. Why? Well, because according to Mercedes, by 2020, there will not be a single model in the lineup that doesn't have at least a mild hybrid. They have a three-prong approach. It's going to be mild hybrids, regular hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and then fully electric models, all by 2020. So this is the shape of things to come. And talking of which, we have a few stylistic changes that have been made to this car. So let's take a closer look and find out what's changed. GLC's always had a little piece of my heart. The reason being that Mercedes, obviously being a premium brand, often you can think of as neglecting sometimes the customers of their slightly cheaper models. Why I like this car so much is it represents a nice hybridization of the affordable end of Mercedes with the way that things are moving, and the way that things are moving is into SUVs. So here we have the GLC. It's been slightly refreshed, and this is the hybrid model. So we have the best, theoretically, of all worlds rolled together into one model. What do you think? Well, I must explain, we are at Geneva, so if people walk through the shop, we're just going to keep going because there's no other way to go where we need to. Now, there's an old expression, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I think that applies very nicely to the front design of this car. I think it was a very popular take. What you needed to do was give it a little bit more visual presence than the standard C-Class had, pop it up a little bit to take into account that it is an SUV, but it shouldn't dominate in the way that its larger SUV brothers do. So I like this. To me, it forms a nice compromise between making a statement on the road, but at the same time not being overbearing. So what's changed in the refresh? Well, we have slightly shallower headlamps here in the front and a redesigned bottom third. Now, this does make a slightly bigger statement on the road. Me, for my taste, I like subtlety a little bit more, but I do go along with the fact that every car has to have an individual and highly identifiable face, and you cannot argue with the fact that the GLC has one of those. Coming through to the side of the car, and we can see that pretty much nothing has changed here. Now, I don't think that that's a bad thing. This size of SUV is something that has grown on me very much throughout time, and the reason being, it represents a nice balance between the practical, I was going to say affordable, it's still Mercedes, but it's really a car that I think you can relate to as a family car driver and owner. And what I like about the use of materials here, if we take a quick look at this wheel arch, is that we have the details. This is plastic trim that lets us know it is an SUV, but they are still stylishly incorporated into the body. So as you come back throughout the design, it does have a visual presence to it, but it isn't overbearing and overdone. It really is nicely, subtly proportioned. So it makes a statement on the road, but nothing crazy. It works for me visually, which I think is why it hasn't been changed. What do you think? Round at the rear, as with the front, is where we get a lot more of that character reinforced. Now, for me, one of the most interesting things about attending press events is not always what they say as much as what they don't. And the word that we've heard more at this press event than any other is Bauhaus. I'm not quite sure if I'm picking up on the reflection of that design within the vehicles, but I think I understand what the intention is. There's a lot of bold statements happening within Mercedes design language these days. There really has been a lot of attempt to make sure market differentiation comes right throughout the lineup. And you can see that here. So what was, I guess, a little bit lacking in character has now been beefed up with the lower third of this car. You have these large, obviously almost wholly there for aesthetic reason, air diffuser at the rear, and these exhaust ports. I call them that, but guess what? If you put your hand into them, there's nothing there. If you want to know where the actual exhaust is, it's tucked away neatly underneath the car. Well, I'm not going to go crazy complaining about that. At the end of the day, this is not a performance car, so I don't have a problem with it trying to look a little bit more sporty than it is. And I do think that it's very important that individual lines all have their own aesthetic. So I'm not crazy for the back of this car, but you know what? I'm not crazy upset about it either. I think I can say that the predecessor lacked a little bit of character, and I like this additional styling at the base here. I think it gives it that little bit of extra oomph that it was missing. So all in all, pretty happy with the refresh so far, but let's take a look inside. Let's take a look inside, and I think here is where there has been a lot of refinement taking place. Now, I can't stress this enough, it's always the case with Mercedes, I would say more than almost any other brand, that if you don't like the way a model is finished, don't worry, there's another 400 different variants to choose from. For styling purposes, this works for me. I like the balance of the materials, but okay, I'm more than prepared to accept I'm an older guy, and maybe I'm entering my taupe years. I get that some of our younger viewers might find this a little dated for them. It works for me. I think if you have a look at the way that these instruments are all laid out, or rather I should say the controlling points, you can see that they are not the most modern, the most up-to-date, the most angular, the sharpest. What they are doing is reinforcing the quality of the build here. So I think that this is a really nice choice of match between these control functions and the materials chosen. Everything here is resonating quality, as you would expect. It all feels really nice and solid to the touch. I don't know if I would have gone with this wood effect inlay. Doesn't resonate quite for me, but I do appreciate the choice of the matched materials. That's nice. And take a look at this. We were talking earlier, I don't know if you saw the review about the new AMG GLE. Now for me, this is a nicer finish on a door pocket. Does that really matter, you might say? Well, you might think not, but if you're going to put 100,000 miles into a car, that's an awful lot of putting bottles in and out of these containers. And if it makes you feel good every time you do it, well, for me, that's money well spent. Let's take a little look at the interior. Well, everything here, to me, exemplifies exactly what you would expect from Mercedes. The layout, the styling, the feel, right from the moment you open the door, it just instantly says Mercedes. And that's not something you can say of every car's design. So some tweaks and modifications have been made to the way that the layout works, but it hasn't changed the overall appeal of the finished product. So, does that all result to a comfortable driving experience? Let's have a sit and find out. Well, the main points that Mercedes were keen to point out when they were giving us our first look at this vehicle are that they have been very enthusiastic about listening to customer feedback when it comes to the refresh on this car. They really wanted to make sure that as much of what customers said they'd like changed and enhanced came along with this vehicle. How that feels when you sit in it from its predecessor is just more light and spacious. I think that they've eased up on the design a little bit where appropriate and just let more light into the car. Now, it's always the case that you're going to find yourself having a very strong reaction to the materials used, and nowhere are you going to find that more than with Mercedes. This isn't quite working out for me, this wood effect here, largely because I like a material to give me the truth of what it is rather than what it wants to look like. But I do like the contrasting colours, it's nice. And let's have a quick talk about this screen. So, Mercedes said the number one piece of feedback that they had in terms of the driver experience of this vehicle was the way that the instruments presented to the driver. I really like the way this screen has been integrated. A lot of drivers, a lot of our viewers don't like floating screens. I would never say that I don't like them. I only don't like them when they're incredibly poorly executed. And for me, this is about as good as it gets. It's subtle without being too subtle. It stands proud of the dashboard, but not in a very obvious way. And the quality of the screen is, of course, excellent. It looks and feels great. without being too much. Now, if you're not somebody who likes particularly to have physical interaction with that, don't worry. Of course, the standard Mercedes-Benz touch controls that you've come to know and love over the years are still very much present, and they are still excellent in terms of how they work and how you can interact with them. As you can see, the thinking behind the GLC here is very much one of minimalism. It's trying to stop you being distracted with anything that you don't need to be looking at while you're busy trying to drive your car. When we started out with hybrid models, the numbers were significantly different to how they're produced now. And the reason is that the ratings that governments require changed partway through that process. So when I tell you that this car can deliver 50 kilometers on purely electric drive, that may not sound so impressive. After all, the first cars were producing something like 33 kilometers purely electric, but that was a different rating system depending on how you used it. So 50 kilometers is actually a very good number, not least if you consider the majority of trips ever taken by somebody who owns a vehicle like this are well within that range. So I think you can own this car, and if you're using it primarily for commuting, almost never have a need of the internal combustion engine. That really is starting to become a possibility. The realistic prospect for the future will be something closer to 100 kilometers for hybrid models, but we're a way off from that. So in the meantime, if you're looking to buy one of these, I think you can feel very comfortable with that as a usage figure. Now, in terms of how the overall dash experience presents to us, it's clean, it's straightforward, and it's very visually simple. Now, while I liked these colors looking inside the car from outside, once I'm in here, they may be a little bit dated even for me. So I guess I'd like something a little in between. Not too modern, but still maybe a little bit more than this. But I really do like the sense of refinement you have within this car. It feels like a very good balance of what we know and like from Mercedes with something a little bit fresh and modern thrown into the mix. Now, always have to do this in a Mercedes. How does the speaker get on with our scrape test? Well, you know what? It's the Burmeister grill, but finally it's smooth. So somebody was listening at some point. We were able to really enjoy touching the surfaces in this car. They're all very nicely put together. So digital interface, as you can see, currently, for reasons best known to somebody else, it seems to be set for Chinese, but it's really effortless. And if you haven't watched our review of the AMG model, then you will not be aware, but this sound system is very responsive to you making questions of it. Okay, so at first I thought it was because my Mandarin wasn't quite up to scratch, but one of the fun elements of dealing with show cars is they're not all quite wired and fired the way you would like them to be. So the speech function in this particular model hasn't been set to work as per normal, but I can assure you from the other cars we've tested, it's really impressive and it works very well indeed. Let's take a look at the central console in greater detail. Well, these air vents are more than familiar to Mercedes owners. Little pet peeve of mine, I never understand why they don't choose to finish this off with a chrome knob. It's plastic, it feels plastic, it looks nice. I just would have loved if they'd have made that anodized metal something to really grip onto, but it's a small gripe. I like the way the three of them present across here, and the controls down here are very nicely set and displayed, and because of the way that they're grouped, it will take you no time at all to learn the position of everything that you're looking for. So, slightly lower down, that's nice. Two cup holders here, a USB-C charge point here, and a really, if you look at my hand, a really generous slot for your phone. That's great. Finally, manufacturers are catching on to the idea that phones just keep getting bigger. Here we have the touchpad, dynamic controls, volume for the stereo. Honestly, these are about as much as you're going to want to need to interact. I really appreciate it when manufacturers put less buttons here and not more. The more and more we get used to interacting with our systems through speech, the less and less we're going to want clutter down here to distract us. Coming back here, well, again, this is not going to be surprising for any regular users of Mercedes-Benz. I'm liking the two USB charge points here and a really good storage space. So, it's comfortable. I think I can safely say it's stylish. It's really nicely finished and the usability is good. but how does it feel as a backseat passenger? Well, regular viewers will be delighted to learn that I didn't mess with the seat in the front at all, so this is a wholly realistic legroom that I'm giving you. I am 178 centimeters or 5'10" in height, but I have very, very short legs. So when I tell you that there isn't acres of room back here, I think that that's a fair comment. If you look at the front of my legs, I think I can say safely that if you're over about 6'1", you're going to feel pretty cramped back here. That said, the seats are very comfortable and supportive, and I have plenty of headroom. So, provided the person sitting in front of you isn't too tall and can let you have some of their more than ample space, you are going to be very comfortable back here. I love it when a door sounds right. Now, the finish of materials and the quality is all exactly as you would expect. There are some really nice, unique design features back here too. Heating and cooling controls are not new for the rear, but the way that this is finished just makes me feel that that little bit of attention has been put into exactly how I'm going to be interacting with it as a rear seat passenger, and I think that that's a really nice touch. Coming a little bit further down, hooray! 2 USB-C charge points and a 12 volt for bigger appliances. I am so happy that manufacturers are really recognizing the need for people to be doing that in the back of cars. Both of these seats have storage pockets in the back and integrated speakers here as well. So as a rear seat passenger, you're certainly not going to feel like you've been left out of the party. Now, as far as the experience of being back here for a business trip, you have your own cup holders, a very nicely finished armrest, and you can sit in a lot of comfort. I think it's important to be very critical of these cars because they are not cheap. So if you're going to invest in one, you deserve to know that you're getting the experience you want. And for me, a big part of that, honestly, is how the rear reflects. After all, you are going to be having people sitting back here and you want them to be comfortable. So there are lots of attention to detail in this car that let us know that that's a priority. I have heated seats back here. I have my own very nicely finished off speakers. Really everything resonates with the quality of the front, but you know what? The individual details really do add something a little extra. So I feel like as a backseat passenger, my needs have been prioritized. And you know what? I like that. One way or another, the story at Geneva is all about electrification, and all of the car manufacturers are going to be spending an awful lot of time trying to convince us that they are the ones who understand what is coming more than anybody else. Well, this is the GLC hybrid, and I have to tell you, Mercedes have spent a long time talking about how they are approaching electrification coming up. There are 3 different approaches they have: mild hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and fully electric vehicles. By 2020, they say that they will not have a single vehicle in their lineup that doesn't feature at least mild hybrid, and that's significant. If you look at the growth in electric engines and how they've been applied, it's really surprising how fast that technology has been embraced. So it's good to see that coming into the mainstream. So if you look at this car here, for example, this will provide 50 kilometers of purely electric drive. You might say, well, that's not much, but it is a start. Bearing in mind when this car was launched, 33 was actually a very desirable outcome, and the rating system has changed significantly since that was introduced. So I think this is a flavor of things to come. Now, if you're a petrol head and you're thinking to yourself, are you really trying to tell me that all of those meaty, muscly AMG cars that I love so very much are going to be changing? Well, I'm sorry to inform you that the answer is over time, yes, they are. But it's not something to be frightened of. It's not going to happen overnight. It is a gradual process. Mercedes are just very keen to explain that they are right at the front of this curve. I think adoption of this technology is going to take a while to catch on, not least because we as customers are going to need a little bit of convincing that electric is as reliable and can deliver us what we want from the performance that we've gotten so used to expecting and demanding from internal combustion engines. And not only that, let's not forget that there are the service implications of having 2 entirely different platforms on your car. Now, if you're like me and you have an older vehicle, you'll delight in being able to do a lot of the work yourself, and if not, take it round the corner to your local mechanic. This car comes equipped with a 48-volt system, and that is not something that your local mechanic is likely to easily be able to tinker with. Well, you know what? Nobody ever faced change and was entirely happy about it, so I think there is going to be a little bit of a curve. But you know what? It's an exciting place to be, and I, for one, am very keen to see where it will take us to next. Since we started seeing a massive influx of electric vehicles at last year's Geneva Motor Show, I made a lot of fuss about the way in which charge points were integrated into cars, sometimes better than others. I really like not only the placement of this, but also how well it's executed. It's easy, it's straightforward, and this is Mercedes' idea of what a charge point looks like. Now, I really admire their optimism. I don't know what your experience of electric vehicles is, but mine is rarely finding one in quite the state that I would like it to. But you know what? If this is in your home, I think you're going to be very happy with that indeed. And look at this. That's really absurdly simple, isn't it? We look straight at the hatch here, open up the cover, plug it in. Why am I such a huge fan of this? Well, I'll tell you. A lot of the vehicles place these in areas where they get particularly dirty. What I like about this is not only the simplicity of its use, and it really is pretty simple. Now, that might seem like a very obviously simple thing, but the operation is so straightforward. That is the only part that I need to clean. When it's the middle of winter and all of this is covered in grit and grime, I really want to be able to get into it simply. And I'm very happy to say Mercedes have done a really nice job with this. Now let's take a look in the back and see what's happening here. Well, I can tell you that absolutely has nothing changed dimensionally from the previous version of this model. And you can see that there is plenty of storage space back here for anything you could reasonably want to put here. If you want to get a better idea of exactly how that looks, it'll take one of me, so not exactly small. Now, I think one of the biggest frustrations of motor shows is also one of the most fun things about them. We get everything that's new and exciting, and sometimes not nearly as much information and detail as we might like. But that only makes us hungry for the driving events, so we can really bring you down as much information as possible. So part of that is that we do not have present pricing for this model, and that's a little frustrating. A lot of our ability to be able to tell you what we really think in terms of whether this is a good buy or not is so dependent upon that. But I think we can all agree it's not going to be cheap. I look to Mercedes not for the best value buy on the marketplace, but for the thing that is best finished. So when I judge a Mercedes, it's from a position of having a very high standard and a very high expectation about what I want from the car. And so far, I have to say the refresh of the GLC really delivers. It's sharpened up some of those edges that needed improving without changing what made the car so successful and so likable in the first place. I am excited that Mercedes have chosen to present the hybrid here at Geneva because I think it is a shape of things to come. Whether that makes you happy or not is very much going to be a personal choice, but it certainly is the way that the world is going. Mercedes-Benz are committed to changing their platform over to electric usage over time. So it's really important that that comes across in their models that they're presenting today. And it's nice to hear them talking about that. It's also very reassuring and nice to see that the models that they're presenting us with that have this technology are not crazily different from the petrol ones that we love so very much already. Well, that about does it from us. If you have any comments or questions on the GLC, particularly on the hybrid model, please pop them below. Please subscribe, and we hope we'll see you all again soon.